The Florida Panthers dropped game 1 of 82 to start the 2023-24 season. We discussed went wrong for the Florida Panthers, which new guys stood out, and how the Florida Panthers can prepare for the Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, October 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News, and you can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get their daily Florida Panthers fix. And today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply with 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. So the Florida Panthers in game 1 of 82 got up to a really fast start, getting a whole bunch of shots on goal, getting into the slot, high danger chances. And then with one break with the Minnesota Wild getting the first goal on the board, 7:53 into the game starts to slow down. The Panthers were starting to get their shots back in the first 40 minutes, but the Minnesota Wild slow it down in the final period, and Filip Gustavsson comes out with a 41 save performance for the Minnesota Wild to defeat the Florida Panthers by a final score of 2-0 from St. Paul, Minnesota. But it is a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nick Fairbanks is back for this post-game edition of the show. Nick, welcome back to Locked On Panthers, my friend.
Thank you. It doesn't feel like that long ago that we were here just discussing this Florida Panthers team, what we were hoping. So glad to be back and doing double duty this week.
Yeah, double duty this week for you for sure. But man, we were not expecting opening night to turn out like this for the Florida Panthers. But I mean, when you think about what the Florida Panthers did as far as the first 40 minutes, puck pursuit was great for the Panthers, and battles against upon the walls, neutral zone was great. But man, when you think about what the Minnesota Wild were doing as far as blocking shots, I mean, they led the game with 26-11 in block shots. I mean, I know that's a product of the Panthers being in their own zone a lot throughout the game, but you think about opportunistic for Minnesota versus what Florida did in this contest as well. I mean, you think about their second goal as well on the 4-on-3, right off a faceoff when Zuccarello shoots, deflects off, I believe, Josh Mahura, and then Joel Eriksson Ek is there to retrieve the puck and shoot it past Sergei Bobrovsky as he's reaching out. And to think that the Florida Panthers even won a challenge too, as well, as Marcus Foligno was way into the Panthers zone, and thinking that this could have possibly been worse for the Panthers. But I'm not extremely discouraged for this Florida Panthers team coming out of this game where the Florida Panthers lost 2-0. But what were your biggest takeaways from this one?
I thought they came out and they looked like the team that they were of the playoffs in the first 5-10 minutes of the game. It was really exciting to see. They were playing fast. They were getting to the open areas and really creating a lot of high danger chances. So very excited to see that. After that, I didn't really see too much of that. It was a lot of chasing, a lot of they were fighting the puck a lot, right? So when the puck is not going your way and it's not settling, it's very hard to, I guess, kind of control the game that way. But, hats off to Gustafsson. He was a brick wall tonight. He made everything look easy. Even some of the plays, like even the save on Reinhardt in the third period, and I know we'll eventually get there, but, he was just making some saves that, you wish maybe, Bob would make and everything, even though he played pretty well tonight. So, it's just one game, but just hopefully, going into the next game or whatever, they figure some things out, and then some of the newer players eventually kind of gel together and understand where they are on the ice.
Yeah, and this is also consideration when it comes to the whole bunch of new guys on the team. We talk about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Nico Mikkola as well. I mean, there are times even in the first 40 minutes where you're seeing Nico Mikkola and Oliver Ekman-Larsson get go for a pinch, and then you see guys like Barkov and Eetu Luostarinen stepping back into the play and avoiding transition on Sergei Bobrovsky and all. We didn't really see too many transition opportunities as far as that, so that's a really encouraging thing to see. I mean, when you think about the Florida Panthers, really when it comes to zone time in their own zone, the longest zone time that I can recall from this one really came into the second period when the third line was on, the Mackie Samoskevich, Anton Lundell line, and the second pair of Nico Mikkola and Dmitry Kulikov there as well. That's really the big extended zone time that I really saw from this game for the Panthers and all. And you really when you think about some guys who you are encouraged, you think about newcomers like Evan Rodriguez. Man, I'm really encouraged by Evan Rodriguez. He had 5 shots on goal. They were feeding him the puck on the power play. There was one play where Carter Verhaeghe was dragging it towards the right wing wall, patient with the puck, and then you see Evan Rodriguez as the trailer feeding him into the slot, and then Gustavsson is like right on the top of his crease to make the save and all. And I think despite the loss, I think that it's going to be a really fun top line to watch.
Definitely will be, and the fact that they were able to create what they even did this game without even playing a real game together, I think bodes well. Rodriguez was shooting everywhere. He was setting up Barkov as much as he could, and Verhaeghe, I think, is he was the kind of the third wheel tonight. I don't know if he did a lot to kind of try to put the Panthers in a position to score. But, at the same time, I think he's going to have to find his way on that line now. Barkov is not going to be feeding him the puck. It's going to be Rodriguez who's going to be getting the puck. And Verhaeghe's just going to have to find a way to get open and utilize his strength which is his wrist shot. So we'll see what happens.
No doubt. Other things to note is Matthew Tkachuk had 9 shots on goal in this game as well. Oliver Ekman-Larsson got 4 on this one, and other stats for this one is once again blocks 26-11 for in favor of the Minnesota Wild and all, and once again hats off to Filip Gustavsson for just standing tall, brick wall. He is the reason why the Minnesota Wild came out with this victory tonight, even though the Florida Panthers were getting in front of that. But at the same time, Nick, the Panthers and were really having a hard time with second chance opportunities when it came to this one. And even in the third period, transition was taken away. The Panthers were taking away the transition game from the Minnesota Wild, but even there was a freeze frame in the Bally Sports broadcast on Thursday night talking about when the Panthers got the puck in the neutral zone. I mean, when you're playing with the lead, it's a lot different on what you do. And the fact that every single time throughout the third period, even though the shots might say 15 shots for Florida, a lot of them came with the extra attacker. You saw what the Minnesota Wild were doing as far as not getting caught on changes as well, and just not getting lost in transition. And really, that is kind of like not necessarily where I think the game was won or lost. I'm going to tell you when I thought it was in the second segment, but. What else did you notice outside of the lack of transition game in the final frame, and also what the Minnesota Wild have done as far as their penalty kill?
So I think 2 things about what Minnesota did. Number one, I don't think Minnesota really swayed from their game plan. Yeah, they got outplayed the first 10 minutes, but they stuck with their program. They scored the first goal. Unfortunately, Bobrovsky, I think, was screened by Barkov, so he caught it late. But I think what Minnesota ended up doing, to kind of round out the game is that they were making sure that there's 3 people deep at all times. So even if Florida was able to gain possession and go through the neutral zone and try to chip it in, it was almost going to be next to be impossible for them to retrieve the puck or even try to get an effective forecheck going. So when that doesn't happen, then you can't create any offense. And all night, it just seems like after the first 10 minutes that Minnesota's keeping Florida to the outside. So they were not allowing anything inside. The only time that they ever got inside was on the power play with Chuck or even Reinhart. So, I mean, it was Minnesota's game. I mean, they played their own game and they played it perfectly.
No doubt. And we're going to discuss more of that in segment number 2. We are going to ask the question. We're going to do a little something new with post-game shows this season. We're going to be asking the question, when did we think this game was won or lost from the Florida Panthers in this contest against the Minnesota Wild? We're going to discuss more about how the new guys looked in this game as well. And we're going to get a Panthers vibe check from you guys, the listeners from X. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. So stick with us. Today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. And the Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is to fill out a simple online form and in some cases jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor-created, doctor-recommended. Don't get caught unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. Jace handles everything from online evaluation to licensed pharmacy, medication, delivery, and ongoing consultation and care. Customer review, Frank said, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3 and just in time. He said, I received our package the same day and I got a sinus infection and my doctor was out of town. No appointments for days. Thank goodness it arrived. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Segment number 2 here on this Friday, October 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on the Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So, Nick, I want to ask you this question. When did you think this game was won or lost on Thursday night, where in this case we're talking about a loss for the Florida Panthers as they fall 2-0 against the Minnesota Wild on opening night to bring their record to 0-1-0. Oh, wait, hold on. You're muted. Hold on. Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I did that. My bad. Sorry, listeners. This is going to be kind of a weird answer, but I honestly think the game was lost after Minnesota scored the 3rd goal, even though the Panthers did, successfully challenge it. If you look at the way that play was designed, they dumped it down, and the first player down there to beat it was a Minnesota player. Not only that, they had another guy there to help retrieve, and from there he was able to put a blind pass right to the slot, and you had a trailing defender from there. So I think right there, Florida was caught off guard, and you just saw like the complete breakdown and Bob left out to dry. So even though they did win the challenge, I think right there that was the game.
Yeah, and you think about when that goal happened, how quickly it was after the Minnesota Wild scored on the 4-on-3 at 12:54, just shortly after, and just the Panthers' inability to get back on their feet as well when it comes to that. The puck pursuit. The Panthers were doing it so well in the first 20 minutes, 25-ish, and then you see it flip on its ugly head for the Minnesota Wild there. So I could see where you're going as far as where you thinking this game was lost. But thankfully, John Conjemi from the video replay room was really quick on that one, and how quick that review was as well to get that reversed on the call as well. Maybe Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel can learn a little bit of that as far as winning challenges as well. So, but for me, the game was won or lost went on the final power play, and I thought, yeah, they were down 2-0 at the time, but the amount of times that I saw Barkov not having the will to shoot at times from the right circle and all, I kept saying, Barkov, shoot the puck. Shoot the puck.
Mm-hmm.
You have a slight opening, but then he waits a little bit too much until it closes, and then he gets it down below to Matthew Tkachuk, and then you see Matthew Tkachuk squeezing it into Reinhart with 3 Minnesota Wild players around him.
Yep.
And I thought that it was one too many times where we saw that. I'm like, the puck's being broken up, and the Minnesota Wild are finding a way to clear the zone or even force it even more to the outside as well. I mean, as far as puck movement, like it's going to be a work in progress. I think OEL once again managing that power play and his ability to move the puck around and getting it to cross ice to someone like Evan Rodriguez, I think that he's gonna catch some people off guard as well. But as far as I know, Tkachuk had 9 shots on goal, but that was really what stuck out to me, was trying so hard to feed Sam Reinhart there when nothing was there.
So that's a set play, and I think Minnesota prepared for it, perfectly. I mean, it worked a ton last year, but you have to come into this season with a little bit more fresher of ideas in order to be successful. And you have Rodriguez on the other wing flanking Barkov, but did he score? Was he necessarily getting shots through? Once they figured out that wasn't happening, then they went back to their bread and butter, trying to get to Chuck down low. He even had a couple scoring chances, just trying to take the puck to the net himself. And you mentioned Barkov not shooting. This has been an issue with him for years. I know that I used to talk about it with Huberdeau, but we don't really have to worry about that issue anymore. But there was a 2-on-1 that Barkov had with Josh Mahura.
Yes.
I knew exactly what Barkov was going to do the whole time, and I screamed in my head. Yes, and I screamed in my head because he could have faked that pass, the original pass, and done something to get around the defender as far as like taking it to the net.
Or a wraparound.
A pass. Exactly. Or getting the puck, kind of bringing it out a little bit more wide and then sending the pass on backhand to Josh Mahura. Or just taking a shot. I don't understand why a forward of Barkov's caliber would try to get a pass over to Josh Mahura, who's not known for his offensive abilities. No slight against him at all. Love Josh. But at a critical moment in the game, and it was on the penalty kill, if I'm correct in this, Barkov should have shot that puck or at least taken it to the net to get a better chance.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's take a drink every single time we mention Barkov being hesitant on shooting. So that's definitely something that we've mentioned quite a few times over the years. I mean, it's
been 11.
Yeah, no doubt. But also, I want to talk about some of the new guys, and I want to talk about Mackie Samoskevich on how he looked as well. Before we get to Mackie, actually, Yves Belinskis, a little bit of trouble with penalties. There was one where he was trying to get the puck with his hand to get it back on the ice and to save it from getting out of the zone. Interferes, I believe it was Foligno that he interfered with. I forget who he interfered, but also went to the box another time, Dmitry Kulikov as well, even though he's not necessarily new. When that his tripping call resulted in the goal as well. But Mackie Samoskevich, man, he looks like he freaking belongs. Like, he's quick to pucks. He's not afraid to crash the net. There was one, I believe there was a wraparound that was stopped from Anton Lindell, and then you see Mackie Samoskevich following through to try to get it in after Filip Gustavsson had it in the butterfly position as well. But man, what do you think of Mackie Samoskevich's game tonight?
He looks like he belongs. You put it perfectly that he was where he needed to be. He was following up on pucks. He was strong on pucks. He did take a couple of whacks. I mean, I know that Pat Maroon caught him, and then I think a little bit towards the end of the game, he took another hit. But you know what? He's going to be able to learn from that and hopefully, be able to brush him off. But one thing I wanted to note about his game is that I think he plays more of a mature game. I think when you're a rookie or it's your first NHL game, you have the jitters. I didn't see him have jitters. He looked like he was comfortable. He understood what he was doing. He was handling the puck. He wasn't trying to do too much. I like the fact that he was carrying the puck instead of just trying to put just a shot on goal just to extend possession and, their time in the zone. So he's going to be fine. We just need to figure out now if that third line, which I do like, I think that line's going to click eventually. But they got to find out what he's going to be really good at. Is he going to be a puck carrier? Is he going to be somebody who drives play? Or is he going to be one of those guys that they're going to depend on to, actually go into the dirty areas and try to dig out the puck?
No doubt. And definitely very, very excited to continue to watch his growth as we see more of him in action on the Locked On Florida with the Florida Panthers. But there's actually a quote that Paul Maurice had on Mackie Samoskiewicz's debut. This is from Jameson Olive of FloridaPanthers.com. He said, quote, "I thought it took about 10 minutes for him to get into the game, which is shorter than I thought it would take. He's a shooter. He gets to those holes, puts one off the bar. He puts the puck where he wants to. A good debut for him," close quote. And yeah, he did get one off the post early on in the game, early on in the second period, and as soon as he entered the zone too, and he was quick to realize that the opposition was a little slow transitioning as well. So some good hockey sense from the 20-year-old from
Yes.
Newtown, Connecticut. So can't wait to see more of him for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss where we are going to prepare for the Winnipeg Jets and get a little bit of a vibe check from the fan base. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. And the NHL season is finally here. The Florida Panthers, will they have the season that we've been yearning for? I absolutely love the NHL, and I know you do too. And that's why I want to tell you about the Sleeper app. The Sleeper app is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network, and it's my go-to for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy hockey. The NHL has never been more exciting than it is now, with studs like Connor McDavid, Alexander Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, Cale Makar, Alexander Barkov, Nico Hischier, Austin Matthews. Just pick more or less on stats for these stars, on stats like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more. You heard me, Panther fans. 100 times the payout on your Sleeper. So start paying attention and get your picks right, and you could win big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Segment number 3 here on this Friday, October 13th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And happy Friday the 13th, by the way, everybody. And Nick Fairbanks, happy Friday the 13th if you celebrate, however you choose to celebrate. But I'm also gonna do a little bit something new here on the show for our first game of the season. So a little bit of a Panthers vibe check from the listeners on the Locked On Florida Panthers X page. Panthers historian Francisco Porta says the Marlins also lost their season opener and turned out all right. Valid. Romy says, sad we couldn't see any fun goals, but I'm not going to freak out. Decker says, it's one game, on to Winnipeg. Corey says, just another season of turning literally anyone into a Vezina winner. Nothing new here. Chris Scott says, honestly, they played better than I was expecting. The defense wasn't terrible, which is better than I thought it was going to happen. Northern Panthers fan said, considering they lost, feeling pretty good. Lots of positives from tonight. Not going to be held scoreless on 41 shots often. Very valid.
Yep.
Tough one. Solid game, just no finish. Chuck Jones says expected. Half the team is new. So Jason Kunkel says look good. Goalie had hot hand. So a lot of
positive.
But a lot of positive within the fan base. I mean, hard to be negative when you're. Can you imagine the negativity that it would have been had the Pittsburgh Penguins beaten the Chicago Blackhawks in game number 81? Yeah,
I'm in Vietnam right now. I'm just having flashbacks right now of all those comments right now. And look what happened the other night.
Yep. So,
but no, I'm just happy that the fans are being positive about it. Panther Twitter is very interesting. They could lose game number 20 and you feel like the world is falling apart or the world's ending because one player did something stupid and he's got to be off the team. But no, I'm just glad that, after a long drive that they had last season, that people are starting to see like, hey, it's one game. They played actually pretty well. They could have actually won the game had a few bounces gone their way. But you know what? We don't have to be in Minnesota again this year.
Yeah, no doubt. Thankfully they can turn the page quickly. It's not there's going to be some growing pains. We even said this even before the season started that with the defense playing better than we thought, it was just really the offense that was really tough for the Florida Panthers as they couldn't get scoring on the board because hey, you give up 2 goals in a game most nights, you're going to find yourself on the winning end. Just once again, great performance by Filip Gustavsson on the night. So the Florida Panthers, they will be traveling to Winnipeg, not too far from St. Paul, for a 4 p.m. matchup against the Winnipeg Jets, Paul Maurice's old stomping grounds. Last time they were in Winnipeg, Panthers were on the end of a Western Canadian trip, which is a little weird for this specific road trip that they're starting Minnesota, Winnipeg, and then New Jersey, and then how the other Western Canadian trip is going to be without Winnipeg in that one. But the last time they were there, the Panthers were injured and bruised. Half the lineup was out. I remember Barkov was out. Gudas was out. Lundell was out too. And Spencer Knight really struggled in that one. But a little bit of a different situation with the Florida Panthers coming into this one. For the Winnipeg Jets, going into this season, we thought that this was going to be kind of a last ride for some of the core pieces. I mean, there was rumors about Mark Scheifele in connection to the Boston Bruins. And, we can maybe laugh a little bit about that now that he got extended, that the Bruins aren't going to, fix their center depth as far as losing guys. And then there was possible rumors of New Jersey or Buffalo trading for Connor Hellebuck. Are they going to trade for that contract? Are they going to be? Are they going to try to find a way to extend him? And lo and behold, both of them get identical contracts, 7-year deals. There's still a good core around there. Kyle Connor's a part of the mix as well. Cole Perfetti, Nikolai Ehlers as well. But then there's what they got back in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade as far as depth pieces as well. You think about Gabe Velarde, Alex Iafallo as well. So they brought in some depth pieces as well. And listen, Brandon Montour would have gotten the love last year if he played in Winnipeg. He would have gotten the Josh Morrissey love last year. And Josh Morrissey had a great season last year, putting up a lot of points as well. So not going to be an easy task for the Florida Panthers going into Winnipeg this time around. But the Winnipeg Jets did lose similarly as far as box score wise, because I did not watch Winnipeg Calgary. Box score wise, they had 37 shots on goal against the Calgary Flames. Jacob Markstrom stood on his head and they came out with the loss. And Connor Hellebuck gave up 5 goals on 22 shots against the Calgary Flames on Wednesday night. So what are your thoughts going into this one, Nick, as the Panthers are hoping not to fall to 0-2-0?
First things first is that I still think it's weird that Hellebuck and Scheifele even signed extensions, just because I know after their playoff loss to Vegas, there was a lot of talk about, hey, let's blow this up. Let's get some pieces back and everything. And, there's a lot of cancers in this, in the locker room. And I think they got rid of actually both of them. I don't like saying that about anybody, but you have Blake Wheeler, who had been there for a long time and probably not the best person, for that locker room. And then you have another guy in Pierre-Luc Dubois, who basically voiced that, hey, I'm here for my contract and I'm leaving after that. I know where I want to go, or basically where I'm going to influence where I want to go. But on to Winnipeg themselves. I think this is why Florida decided to load up on size in the offseason. Winnipeg likes to play a heavy big boy game. And if you're not willing to take the punishment and you're not willing to lay hits, forecheck, and play a very strong and very defensive type of game, they're going to smother you. And it's going to be quick, and they're basically just going to take over the game probably probably after a period and a half, and that's going to be it. So Florida's going to have to find a way, number one, to get pucks through, which they did not tonight. They were definitely missing Brandon Montour and Aaron Ekblad, whose abilities do allow them to do that. So you'll need Oliver Ekman-Larsson to be at his best, and hopefully Evan Rodriguez or Barkov can get one to actually pop through. So Florida Stars need to come to play as well.
No doubt. And as I'm looking up the all-time series between the Florida Panthers and the Winnipeg Jets, because honestly, I don't remember past last season as far as
I don't think
last
it's good.
win my browser is kind of freezing at the moment, so we're doing this on the fly. But it's funny, we still have time to discuss who's going to score the first goal for the Florida Panthers. Mine before the season, I think it's a lot of people's same pick, but I still have Carter Verhaeghe as the first guy to score for the Florida Panthers, and thought it was going to come tonight. I thought it was the Panthers were gonna have that opportunity as far as getting a chance to win, and even get a chance to get on the score sheet as well. So yeah, who do you have as the first Florida Panthers to score this season?
Well, after tonight's game, and I know each game doesn't really translate into it, but you have to be very positive on how Evan Rodriguez was just trying to let everything fly. I think he's eventually going to get the first one, but I would also not be surprised if Mackey scores his first NHL goal, because his shots seemed like they were pretty accurate, and he was the only one that basically hit a post tonight that actually beat Gustavsson. So one of those two players, I think, is going to score the first one.
So the Panthers, in their last 4 games in Winnipeg, they're 3-1-0 actually going into Winnipeg in the last few matchups that they've been there. This is according to mcube.net as far as all-time series. I'm just looking at history for the Florida Panthers in Winnipeg. So not necessarily a house of horrors for the Florida Panthers going into it's a Canada Life Center, I think the name of the arena is called. Yeah, I think it's Canada Life Center still that arena is called. Yeah. So
every stadium in Canada, I think, is either Rogers or whatever they named it in Toronto.
Rogers Place, Rogers Center, Rogers Arena for Blue Jays, Edmonton Oilers, and Canucks, all of them. But I'm sure that it's called Canadian Tire. Canadian Tire Center is the Senators. Canada Life Center is Winnipeg Jets. But okay. Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this post-game edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, as the Florida Panthers lose 2-0 against the Minnesota Wild on opening night, game 1 of 82. But there's still a lot of positivity for this Florida Panthers team heading into the weekend and even into the rest of the series, as new players are starting to, trying to mesh together, and it's going to be some growing pains. But thank you so much once again for joining me. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Appreciate you having me on, and had me on twice this week. And I want to thank Jacob again for allowing me to borrow some time for Winans Wednesdays. But everybody, you guys can follow me on X at Prudentia0. Drop me a line, drop me a follow. I know all us Panther fans are trying to follow each other this season, and trying to keep our spirit up. So let's click that add button, and let's have a good season.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you so much. And I will see you next week, my friend, for the home opener against the Leafs.
Ooh, let's bring home a W.
No doubt. And if you like what you're hearing, Please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.